Hello and welcome. It is Nomadic Shaman here. Thank you so much for visiting my page. Today's video, we're going to do something a little bit different. First of all, happy Labor Day, everyone. Now, let's get into it. Today's video is going to be a story time. Y'all, my guys are saying that I'm being too serious. I need to lighten up. I need to have a little bit more fun. And I definitely need to incorporate some of my story time. So, with that said, today is going to be a video that's centered around a story time. It's going to be about my first introduction into the dark night of the soul and my first experience having to do with graveyard magic and death spells, y'all. Okay, so let's start. Let's get into it. Grab your tea, grab your coffee. Hopefully I don't talk y'all ear off, but okay, so let's get it. Now, at the time, it was what? March of 2020. It was, probably like the end of March 2020, the beginning of April 2020, maybe even mid-April, okay, of 2020. It was one of them. So at the time, your girl was single. Okay, I'm talking about single. And I was given online dating a try. Now, at that time, I believe I was talking to two men. And around that time, I was talking to two men. But there was one that kind of like stuck on the phone. Like, it didn't really go further than that. I really didn't have that much interest in. And there was another one that actually I connected with in person. Now, I'm going to get to that because that's part of the story, yo. So, moving on. At the time, I lived in Philly. And I lived into this cool historic house actually, that they had converted into apartment buildings. So it was like 4 apartment buildings. And then there was a storefront, which was like an African hair braiding shop. So I was taking advantage. Your girl was jet skiing. I mean, I was going here and there and just essentially traveling and making use of those cheap airline tickets, y'all. Like, they were so mad cheap. I was going to places like Florida and Colorado for like $30, $35 one way. That was like during the height of the pandemic. So I said, why not? I was cautious, at least as cautious as I could be, double up, triple up mask. But I was like, let me take advantage of these rates. So I flew somewhere and then I came back home to Philly. And as I'm entering my apartment building, I'm noticing I see like 3 flies swarming in the hallway, and they were big. I said, that's what I was like, because I had never seen flies that big like that before, but I didn't really pay no mind. So let me just go ahead and get me a can of Raid right quick and spray around, the area, just to mitigate any additional flies, him inviting his cousins and them. Let me just go ahead and handle that right quick. So I sprayed around. I went back to my apartment. I lived on a 3rd floor, and your girl went to sleep. I was tired. Okay. So then the next day, around, I would say mid-afternoon, I'm, getting everything ready and stuff like that to run errands. And so I stepped out of my apartment building. It was like the first, before my apartment, my apartment. And it was mid-afternoon. And I'm coming out of my apartment. And y'all, it was like night and day. I went from seeing 3 flies the day before to all of a sudden, it was a damn fly infestation. I'm not talking about these little small flies. No, y'all. It was like big, like this big. And they are flying all over the ground, the ground floor, all the way to the top floor, the 4th floor, to the peak of the ceiling, y'all. They were everywhere. It was like a damn fly infestation. So I said, okay, I need to get something stronger, because obviously what I was using was not working. But I said, hold up, let me call my landlord to let him know what's going on. So I called my landlord and I'm like, hey, I just came home from a trip yesterday And all of a sudden, I'm waking up, I'm set to go out, and I see all these flies like everywhere. I'm like, what is going on? He said, I'm aware of it. He said, I'm going to send a guy over there to handle it and to take care of it. Your neighbor who's on the 4th floor, who also she was an African lady who owned an African hair braiding shop on the 1st floor, her storefront. He said she was the first person to call him this morning because apparently they were in full effect that morning. And he said, this was his recounting of his story. He said that she was shooken up. She was crying, she was coughing, and she was choking at the same damn time, y'all. And you're probably like, what you mean? Well, apparently that the infestation that was going on in the hallway paled in comparison to the infestation that was going on in her apartment. Her apartment was so infested to the point where anytime she opened up her mouth, they would fly in her mouth, and she was choking and coughing and trying to spit it out as she's trying to recount the story to my landlord. This is my landlord's testimony of how the conversation went with her. So he told me this. He said, I know it's bad. He was just like, this is the first time I've ever heard of it being this bad. And I was like, yeah, because at that point I had lived there for 10 years. Okay. And I've never seen an infestation like that. I've never seen an infestation of flies like that. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So him and we were just all dazed and confused, y'all. But he said, rest assured, I call the pest control people. They're coming in. They're going to go ahead and handle it, but they won't be here until tomorrow. So I'm like, okay, fine. Let me just make my way to Family Dollar, which was right across the street, and see what I could get in the meantime. Now, fortunately for me, there were no flies in my apartment, y'all. Not one. Not one. But when I stepped out, all the flies were dead right outside the threshold of my apartment. I tell no lies. There were so many flies that were dead right outside my apartment. Right outside my apartment door on the threshold floor, right over the threshold floor. And then, however, I would still see the flies swarming on the 3rd floor, all the way up to the roof, all the way on the ground floor. So anyways, I'm making my way to Family Dollar. And then I run into the old man. Now, the old man lives on the 2nd floor. He's funny. He said, hey. And I turn around and I see him. I said, oh, hey, how you doing? And he said, well, I haven't seen you in a while. But he said, I know you saw them flies up in there. And I said, yeah, that's how come I'm going to Family Dollar. And he said, I literally just called the landlord to let him know. He said, man, them flies big. And he said, and y'all, he wasn't lying, because them flies were like this big, y'all, this big. He said, them flies big. He said, you know what those are, right? I said, no, what? He said, roots. Y'all, he said roots. He said somebody been playing in them roots, y'all. He said, because my auntie used to play up in that mess. She would go in the graveyard, she would go in the cemetery, and she would do what she would do. He said she would do what she would do, and next thing you know, flies like that, he said, will be at them people's house. I said, oh, okay. Now, pause break. This was my first interaction with this, y'all. I heard of roots, but I ain't never heard of no graveyard spells. I ain't never heard of no cemetery spells. I ain't never heard of or seen those big ass flies all up in one place like an infestation. I was new to this, okay? Everything new. So I'm on my way to, I told him I was going to go ahead and get some pest control. He said, that ain't going to help. He said it just like that. But I said, whatever, let me try my luck. So I grabbed my stuff. I'm heading back into my apartment building, and it seems like there were more. There was more on the door. It was like I was having to shoot him off the doorknob just so I could open the next door and shoot them off. I'm like, what the hell? I mean, there were flies like everywhere, even more since I left. So I get up to my apartment, and there were like a couple that had flew in. I said, oh, hell no. You know what I'm saying? I'm about to handle this right quick. So now, about the story about the old man, something told me, let me look this up online. So here I am looking up online, fly spells, death spells, graveyard spells, what does large flies. I was looking up all different types. Google and I were like this, okay? And sure enough, you know, I saw stories recounting stories of flies. I was even looking on YouTube at the time, looking up flies that associated with death spells and graveyard spells. So I'm like, damn, this man wasn't lying. So something told me, let me call a psychic. And that's what I did, y'all. I called me a psychic. Now, at that time, I wasn't speaking to spirits because I wasn't tapped in. Again, it was like the beginning of my dark night of the soul experience, okay? And I said, let me call a psychic. So I'm calling a psychic, and through the conversation, I'm not going to explain everything here, at least not in this story time. But what I got from the information was the person that I had met online, which y'all, please be careful with who you meet online. Please vet them. Please take your time in vetting, and please be discerning. Okay. But okay, back to the Scarcely, program. So the person, based on what the conversation I had with the psychic, what I had discovered was that the person that I was talking to that had came to my house, that I had met in person, okay, he was connected, associated, and tied with, at the time, either a girlfriend or a baby mama, who was the person that was behind the death spells and the graveyard spells, okay? And the crazy thing, as if all this stuff that I didn't say was crazy before, the crazy thing of it all was that anybody who comes to my apartment knows, or who visited my apartment or who lives there, knows that the 3rd floor doorbell connects to the 4th floor, okay? And the 4th floor doorbell connects to my floor. So if anybody who's trying to get a hold of me would have to ring on the 4th doorbell. Anybody who wants to get on the 4th floor would have to click on the 3rd doorbell. Now, the reason why I say that is because remember when I was telling you about the African lady who lived on the 4th floor and how her apartment was fully infested to the point where she was coughing, spitting, and choking, okay? Because there were so many flies that was coming in and her mouth. Oh, and crying, because there were so many flies that were coming. Like, it paled into comparison of the fly activity that was going on in the hallway, in the common areas. So based on what I was thinking, and the psychic's phone call confirmed that death spell, that graveyard spell that was sent to the 4th floor was actually intended for me. But the person who sent it didn't know that I was actually on the 3rd floor and not on the 4th floor, based on how the doorbells and the names had lined up to each other. You looking at it, you would think I was on the 4th floor, okay, as opposed to the 3rd floor. So that's how I but that was further confirmation for me that what was sent was in fact indeed intended for me. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the start of the dark night of the soul for me, as well as just like a little snippet. The woman that was behind the spell work, she has a level of obsession that is kin to Glenn Close from Fatal Attraction. What's her name? What's that lady? Yolanda from Selena. Single white female. If you guys are familiar with any of those movies, like her obsession is on that level. But with that, I'm going to cut my story time here. If you enjoy this and you would like to see more story times, feel free to comment, like, share, and follow. And with that, on to the next one.